Welcome, everyone. I call the July 17, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is to conduct a study session on the Capital Facilities Plan. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing an option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. For those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This time is for comments on issues not scheduled for hearing on tonight's agenda. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. Please note that the City of Bothell does not tolerate verbal harassment. Please remember this during your comments. Public comment will be allowed both in person and via Zoom. Those wishing to comment via Zoom are asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were also asked to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance, although I don't see any, may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on the sign-in sheets. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. A video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so that everyone may follow along. At this point, I'll take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Here.
Commissioner Lever.
Here.
Commissioner Robson.
Here.
Commissioner Sills.
Here.
And Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Thank you. And in addition, Deputy Community Development Director Gates, Deputy Public Works Director and City Engineer Morikawa, Senior Financial Analyst Zundel are in attendance, and Quan Wong, Finance Director, is attending virtually via Zoom. And he's waving to us, so hello there. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn off the sound as there is a delay. For commissioners, at specific breaks in the presentation, I will be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand, and I will call on you as I see you. This will help avoid the problem of having 2 people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, or second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. First item on the agenda is public comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing, as well as accepted sign-in sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. However, there is no one in the audience. Those speaking will have 3 minutes. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all commissioners and are part of the record. This time is for items not on tonight's agenda. Please let us know if there are any comments received.
There was only 1 comment received prior to 3 p.m., which was added to the packet around 4 o'clock today.
All right, great. We'll be sure to review that. Are there any Zoom commenters? Don't see anyone. Anyone wishing to speak via Zoom? No, seeing no hand raised, then we will proceed. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the July 3rd meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Sills moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Westerbeck seconds. Has been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the meeting minutes for July 3rd? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 All right. Minutes are unanimously approved. On to our next item, the study session on the Capital Facilities Plan. And we'll begin with a staff presentation.
So why don't I get started? Again, good evening, everyone. Before I talk about the capital facilities plan, I really want to reach out and thank every one of you being on the Planning Commission. You did a fantastic job on the comp plan. So I attended many city council meetings, and I am not quite as well informed, but I am so glad that we have a plan that will be adopted later on. So again, thank you so much for all your hard work. So really appreciate that. So tonight, I want to again talk to you about the capital facility plan, not just by itself, but how it is going to relate to the overall budget process. I have been here for about a year and a half, and I took some time to review the processes, and I have come to the conclusion, along with our executive leadership team and also the city manager, that we will have a really more strategic and more comprehensive approach to the budget process. And in my opinion, and in all of our opinions, it is really one city, one budget. So it is not just about the operating budget. It is not about just the CFP budget, which is into the many millions. And it is not just the utility budget, but they are all related. So I want to do a more strategic approach to how we come up with, again, a city budget. So I appreciate your time this evening to go over our plan. So tonight, I just want to give you some really high-level overview of the process. And then Gretchen and Steve will talk more about the details. So I'm going to focus more on the what and the why. So what are we doing? What are we planning to do? And why we are doing it in this particular way. So what we are doing is, again, for the next biennium, we will be focusing on how we will balance the city's budget. And again, the city of Bothell is in a very good financial position. Unlike many other surrounding cities and districts, they are struggling with a deficit. We don't have a deficit, but we want to maintain a good financial health. And that's why we want to be, again, do a more strategic approach to how we budget the operating budget, the CFP budget, as well as the utility budget. So that's what we are planning to do. Later on, Gretchen will talk to you about the schedule between now and November. November is when the City Council will be presented with our budget, our CFP budget, and the utility budget, and they will spend some time reviewing, and then in November and early December, they will adopt the budget. But between now and November, there will be a lot of changes. We are still working on the numbers. The economy is picking up, and I'm so glad we are seeing a lower interest rate. So hopefully, lower inflation, hopefully we will have better rates and also better economic growth. Having said that, we are still very cautious in our approach. So we will conduct, after tonight, conduct another study session with the City Council on July 30th, and then a third one in early September. So what we are planning to do is, again, getting direction from the City Council. As you know, they are the CFP committee. They restructured the committee a little bit this year, but they wanted to make sure that staff and the City Council are getting feedback on boards and commissions members. So that's what we are going to do. Why we are doing it this way, and again, looking at the city as one city, one budget. As you know, after the comprehensive plan, the CFP is really the document where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, where we will be making tough decisions on where to invest, how much we can invest, and then prioritize where the money is coming from and how do we pay for all the priority projects. So again, taking a more cautious approach is in my opinion, and also in our opinions, the best way to go. So again, we will be seeking your feedback tonight. We are not asking any formal action from you. We talked to the Parks Board last week, and they gave us very good feedback. And we hope to do the same with you this evening. So having said all that, I am here to answer any questions that you have. But at this time, I would like to turn the microphone to Gretchen, who will lead you to really a review of the process and also the time frame. And also Stephen later on will be talking more specifically about the transportation projects. So, so Gretchen, why don't you walk us through our timeline and our process? Thank you so much for your time, commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kwan, for the introduction and the overview. So, hello, my name is Gretchen Zendel. I've been with the city of Bothell for over 16 years. And my mentor 16 years ago is actually Stephen Maricella. So, so I've always been working on the capital facilities plan and assisting engineers by providing them funds, you know, to where we're at and tracking the capital revenues and expenditures so the engineers can successfully monitor their projects. And so we've always been successful at putting together the CFPs and documents. So here tonight we're presenting you the 25-20-31 CFP, and I will lead the first couple of slides and then hand over to Stephen to talk about the transportation projects. After I speak my part, I will stop and ask any questions that you may have for Stephen, Kwan, and me as well. So tonight, we are going to, actually the objectives for tonight's meeting are to brief you on the capital planning process steps, including an overview of primary capital city funds for transportation projects and the CFP development timeline. Also to present the proposed transportation projects and to gain feedback from the Planning Commission on project priorities and recommendations. The planning process takes place in even number of years in coordination with the budget development process, and the first 2 years of the CFP are incorporated into the city's 25-26 budget. Projects and priorities are identified via plans and programs such as, for an example, sidewalk programs, bridge programs, the comp plans, and so forth. Capital project teams update project cost and revenues. For an example, updates will include removal of projects that have been completed and inclusion of projects that may receive grants. Finance Department prepares a forecast of revenues anticipated for the following 7 years. capital project team gathers initial input from the Parks Board, Planning Commission, and the Council CFP Committee on future projects. Capital project team establishes project timing, estimates M&O's cost, identifies revenues, and makes recommendations to the ELT and city manager. Lastly, council adopts the CFP. The 2531 CFP is a work in progress. These numbers will change as projects progress. Financial and timing data becomes more accurate. Please keep in mind that the receipts fluctuate from year to year, and it is important to not allocate these revenues until the monies are received. The city funds for transportation projects are primarily made up of REIT and impact fees, and SARCUT and solid waste management fees are designated to street overlay projects. The estimated available fund balance for each fund at year-end 2031 is shown here. REIT 2 may be only used for financing REIT 2 eligible projects and programs specified in the CFP. REIT 2 revenues are restricted and may only be used for certain transportation, bridges, sidewalks, water, sewer, storm systems, and capital and park capital purposes. The $1.5 million includes a $500,000 opportunity reserve, which is also named as Opportunity Fund 2. I'd like to also indicate that your memo mentions the $4.2 million, and as Kwan has mentioned earlier, we continue to update the project, so the revenues will go up and down as the project progress, and we may get new grants, and then we lower the city funds, or we don't get the grants and then we increase. So just recently we've identified, further cost, additional cost, and we put that in. So that's why you see the difference from your memo that's 4.2 to now 1.5. And it may go back up, it may go down, but we're going to keep it at the minimum of 1.5. That's what we're proposing until council adopts the CFP. So, okay. The purpose of setting aside capital funds is to provide for necessary future capital improvements. It can be used as match funding for grant opportunities or to meet a need that was not identified at the time the CFP was adopted. Transportation impact fees are restricted for transportation projects, specifically vehicle capacity, pedestrian, and bike projects. If the impact fees have not been expended within 10 years of the receipts, they shall be refunded to the current property owners. The estimated end balance is $2.4 million. Lastly, the estimated balances for SARCUT and solid waste are $163,000 and $97,000. And again, they're designated to street overlay projects. So. Here's a list of completed tasks. In April, we briefed EOT on the current, ongoing, and new project cost estimates and revenue forecast. In June, we informed the council on the process of updating the 25-31 CFP, reviewed revenue projection, and provided an overview of current, ongoing, and potential new projects. Last week, we presented the CFP-related revenue forecast and funding approach proposed park projects to the Parks Board for feedback. Tonight, we are presenting you the proposed transportation projects and are seeking your feedback. The upcoming tasks include hold additional study sessions with the council on July 30th, in early September, and October 15th. Lastly, council adopts the CFP in November. That's what I have for now. Before we go on to hand it over to Stephen, I'd like to know if you have any questions for Kwan, Stephen, or I about the revenues or the process, the timelines.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Lever.
Hi, I just have a question for the team that you refer. Can you tell me the composition of it? I'm just kind of curious when you put the capital funds team that allocates the funding, like who participates in that committee making the recommendations?
Do you want to answer that?
Sure. So in the past, it used to be a combination of the city manager, the finance director, 3 council members, a planning commission member, and a parks board member. I think this year the council decided that they wanted all the council involved. And so what's happening now is they went to the parks board, we're coming to you to the planning commission, and then I think are they coming back for the utilities? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the council will be the one that finally makes decisions on the last. So they're sort of the committee with input from the Parks Board and the Planning Commission.
Other commissioners? All right, I've got a couple of questions. I have managed capital projects in the past, for full disclosure. So does the city have adopted financial policies?
So let me speak to that. Yes, we do have financial policies, and the most important one is a 90-day operating reserve. So that's why we are moving into a more comprehensive approach to the budget process. Because if we invest more money in the CFP and in any other infrastructure, there is a maintenance and operating costs associated with it. So this year, we are considering all the M&O costs in the operating budget before we are going to make some final decisions. So yeah, we do have a whole set of financial policies. But again, the most important one is we cannot go below a 90-day operating reserve.
Good. I saw reference that in the memo, so that's real good. That helps with your bond rating.
Yes. Yeah, and we are at a AA plus, so we are in a very good financial position.
That's great. That's good to hear. Are those policies available somewhere for us to look at?
Yeah, they are online, but I can email the link to you or to Christian, and then we can pass it along to the commissioners.
I'd appreciate that. Thanks. I saw reference that one-time revenues will be used for one-time expenses. Can I assume that's a policy? Certainly a good.
Yes, particularly in the REIT, the real estate excise tax, it is very limited. It is also very sensitive to the economic situation. So yeah, for the REIT, is most of the CFP are going to be used on one-time projects.
Okay, good. Yeah, I know other agencies have gotten themselves into trouble by using one-time revenues and incurring ongoing costs, so that's good to hear.
Yes, yeah.
Is there a contingency policy for capital projects?
I don't think there's a written policy. There's typically how we do business in the capital group. And usually we don't do anything under 10%, but the range of projects that we're doing nowadays is so large.
Yeah.
10% is great when you probably 10 million and more, but when you start getting into some small projects, 300, 400,000, 10%, kind of like a house remodel, 10% goes very quickly.
Yes.
So we kind of fit it for the type of project.
Okay, great. Sorry, I got a number of these. How do you make decisions on debt financing as opposed to operating reserves or any other funding?
Again, I really congratulate the finance staff and the philosophy of the City of Bothell. We really don't go out for a lot of debt issuance. We only have 3 debts, and we refinance 2 bonds earlier this year to a lower interest rate. The other big debt is the City Hall. So we are paying, again, debt service on the City Hall project. So we really don't go out and borrow a lot. We just go out and borrow for major projects such as the City Hall.
Okay. That's
For completeness, I'll add one more thing. So there's this thing called the Public Work Trust Fund loan.
yes.
And typically they're very low interest rates on the order of 0.5% or something less than 1%. Sometimes if you meet certain criteria, you get the lower rate. Typically it's lower than your interest rates you get. So it's almost like earning money. And in those cases, to us, it makes sense to try to get those loans, do the project up front, rather than experience inflation as we delay projects.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with that fund.
I would like to add a few notes about those debt services. We have about 6 debt services, but we issued those debts years ago for the Bothell Crossroads Motorway Boulevard projects. And we're about to, both debts are going to be, they will mature shortly, by 2034, 2032. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Westerbeck.
I have a minor or small question, just out of curiosity. Saw cut fees, $300,000 a year. Is that something Public Works like subs out as a city service for contractors working in the street? Or what's the saw cut service that we make money off of?
Typically,
I was looking at you guys because I knew you were involved with the actual work.
Yeah,
So.
typically if there's a roadway and there's a reason to cut into a roadway, I
Yeah,
can't, I
like a
forget
half
the
overlay or whatever.
Yeah, I forget about the exact criteria,
Yeah.
but they are charged for that because we assume we're gonna have to, it creates more maintenance and degradation in the future.
So it's a fee to do it.
It's a fee.
It's not actually, undertaken by the city. Got it,
So
I
it's
was
a
curious.
revenue source in the case when certain people cut into a roadway that meets certain criteria.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
So even though they're doing the new half overlay and everything, there's assumed there's going to be, because you've had to cut into it, there's going to be some extra maintenance.
That I would have to clarify. Again,
Okay.
I'm not exactly clear on the criteria of the fee, but the concept is essentially if they cut into the road very often, especially a very
Right.
new overlay,
Yeah.
it's going to degrade faster.
Yeah.
And so they're paying a fee for us to help us accommodate.
I think I actually paid it. I was just kind of curious. I was like, oh, wait.
Okay.
Because I know like some cities, Bellevue and some others will actually provide certain sort of subcontracted things that I think in Bothell, we always have to go out as contractors to get from a subcontractor. So I was just starting to be curious if we were offering that service, but now I understand it's a
Yeah,
fee.
it's
So,
the other way.
okay.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to, I was curious. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, if you'd like to proceed.
Okay, I'm gonna be looking at two screens, so this is gonna get pretty involved because we're gonna actually go into the projects themselves, one by one, kind of. So this is kind of how projects are developed. So you guys are involved in a comp plan, and really transportation projects, most of the projects come out of that 20-year plan. And then what it is a capital facilities plan is 7 years of that 20 years. So really, we're trying to prioritize projects, what kind of funding we have, what can we get done in the next 7 years. And the comprehensive plan, like you know, is fed by other studies and analysis and plans, like the bike plan was adopted a couple of years ago, and that's feeding into our comp plan. We did a sidewalk prioritization study. Although it's not adopted yet, it's kind of built into the comp plan itself. So the projects actually come from somewhere. It's not like the capital facility plan, we say, hey, what project do you want today? It's already kind of gone through a public process and been vetted out. Really what we're trying to do is come up with a plan on when and how much we can spend and how much do we have. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about the 6-year tip, but the 6-year tip is a 6-year plan, and it's required annually. We have to submit it to the state. And basically, what transportation projects are you going to do in the next 6 years? It really is the capital facilities plan transportation project list. They're the same thing. So we really do most of our work in the CFP. We talk to the committee, and we talk to the public during the CFP process, and of course during the planning process. The 6-year tip pretty much matches the CFP, and we're just required to submit it annually. And we're required to get the council to approve it annually. Because a lot of grants require you to have it in your 6-year tip in order to qualify. Let's see. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. Yep. So I'm going to primarily be going over projects that we're proposing to modify. So if you looked at the old CFP online and you look at this proposed new one, the transportation projects, I'm trying to describe the differences to you. So if I haven't touched a project or talked to you about a project, it pretty much, and we haven't finished it this year, it should still be there and it should be updated in terms of cost, where we're finding the funding, the timelines, and that sort of thing. So if you have a question on any of those projects, make sure you talk to me at the end of the presentation. A recommendation for this draft CIP, just like the previously adopted one, is to continue projects till completion. And that is especially important for projects that we get grant funding for. So nowadays, typically you have like three phases of a project. A design phase, you gotta sometimes buy right away, and then you construct things. And if it's a large project, 15, 20 million, typically we're getting separate grants for each phase. Once we get the grants, we have a certain amount of years we're typically supposed to finish the project by or get to the next phase. And if we don't finish a project, a lot of times the federal funding agency will ask for their money back. So we're kind of committed once we start the project, and it's a good thing to kind of finish projects. Sorry, too many mouses. So the other thing we're recommending is highlighted in yellow are basically the transportation programs, what we call programs. These are programs that we need to do annually. They're not discrete single projects. So things like annual pavement preservation. Every year we're trying to maintain our roadways, so we do our same thing with bridge inspection. We're supposed to look every 4 years, every 2 years we're supposed to do certain types of inspections. The programs also serve as a pot of money for grants. So if there's enough money in there and we can get a grant, let's say we get an 80% grant, we can use some of that program money as seed money to go after a grant fund and then actually perform a discrete project. So our recommendation is to keep these programs going, and I'll touch base on some of them more in the future. Okay, so here's where we start getting into individual projects. And at any time, if you're not sure what I'm talking about or where it is, pause and we can try to describe. Maybe I can bring Google Maps up or something and we'll figure it out. T66 is a roundabout project we're actually constructing this year. It's at the intersection of Meridian and 240th Street. We have grant funding, actually a couple different sources of funding, and it should be completed this year. That's why you won't see it in the next CFP. It's because it'll be done. The next two aren't exciting, but they're overlay and pavement preservation projects. We got federal grants for those two, and they're actually happening this summer. I think we had 4 or 5 overlay projects this summer, fairly large. This is probably our largest year ever in terms of how much pavement overlays we've done. So those two should be completed toward the end of the summer. And 185th, you had a hard time getting here. That's outside back in front of our door. We should be done toward the end of August. I think next week what I heard is all the paving will be done. And what we have to do is kind of let it cure a little bit. You don't want to put striping down too early. They'll stripe it within about a month or so, and hopefully before school starts, it opens up.
Could you describe the difference between pavement preservation and overlay?
I can't, and I have no clue why we use those two different words. And
Well,
I
then
think in the
reason I was
future, we should
confused.
pick one and stick with it. So that's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I think we have enough engineers that they kind of use two different things, and yeah, we'll fix that. Yeah, how come this not working? Oh, there we go. So we do have a couple projects. It is kind of interesting. Sometimes you'll see a large project and then you'll get invited to the ribbon cutting and then you'll see it in the next CFP and you go, why is it still there? Sometimes we have commitments like permits. If we're working in a wetland and we disturb the wetland, we may have to maintain it for 5 to 10 years and make sure the planting that we're restoring it with has taken. So you'll see continued expenditure of funds even though the project's still in use. So these are two projects that actually are completed, but the second one was to repair that rockery on Bothell Everett Highway or Bothell Way. And we have to maintain the stream restoration part that got affected. And the one on top is an adaptive signal control system, which is all electronic stuff that's in your traffic signal. And what they're doing right now is spending a little bit of money to calibrate it and make sure it's working right. The limits of the money are below $50,000. So when it's that low, we just kind of stick it in the budget. It's not really a defined project at that point. So I'm going to shoot you a lot of information. So again, yeah. So this is kind of a cool thing. You guys know Sound Transit is going to come through with bus rapid transit. One of them is going to come down 522 and 185th, and the other one's going to go up and down the I-405 corridor. So associated with these programs are what they call access programs. They try to fund local agencies to do a certain amount of pedestrian or bike projects to allow people easier access to the stops. There's always a limited amount of money, so it's kind of a competition. And Bothell was pretty successful in actually getting some of these funds. So let me see if I can make sure I get this right. So the one on the right is downtown, and you see that line goes from 522 up Kaesner Way to the 104 intersection, all the way on the west side of 104 to 185th. So there will be a BRT bus stop at that intersection on 185th and 104. So this project will essentially make ADA improvements on the west sidewalk. It's not going to replace the sidewalk, but it will replace ramps, and sometimes there's old driveways that are kind of steep sideways. It'll make it all ADA compliant, so anybody walking up in that corridor can actually get to the bus stop. So believe it or not, that's about $1 million project, and it's fully funded by Sound Transit. So we're adding this on. The other two, I'll start with the one on the left. That's actually an interchange at 160th and I-405. And just to the south, near that circle on the left side, is the parking ride at Brickyard. Right, almost directly east-west of that, there's going to be a pedestrian overpass there because that's going to be an inline BRT stop. And you're going to be able to reach it from the parking ride as well as 160th. That's the road that parallels I-405 on the east side. So There's going to be some crosswalk improvements to get across Juanita Woodinville Drive at the Park and Ride. And on the right side, you see there's a little line there. There's missing sidewalk on 116th. That's going to be filled in. And there's going to be a crossing at to Juanita Woodinville or Brickyard Road on the other side as well. As part of the I-405 projects, the other interchange in the middle is at I-405 and 527. And if you're familiar with that, if you're coming from PCC, let's say, you'd walk up the right side of the road, you'd have to cross that on-ramp, the southbound on-ramp in I-405, which is kind of dicey if you want to cross that bridge. So WashDOT is putting some infrastructure there with the project, and this project will essentially put a RRFB, rapid rectangular flashing beacon, those things that flash, so that somebody can press a button and there'll be better visibility of pedestrians crossing there. So all of those projects on the left two graphics are about $2.5 million. So pretty good, $3.5 million from Sound Transit to do some improvements. So we've added this to the CFP since the last one. Okay, now we're gonna really get into it. So these projects will have some modifications proposed from the last CFP, okay? But the changes really don't require new funding. And again, remember I said that some of the programs have funding to provide seed funding for grants. So if we get a grant, sometimes we move that seed funding from the program into a discrete project. So you don't really have to allocate more funding. We're just kind of moving things around a little bit, but we wanted to point those out to you. So the first one is T93 is a pavement preservation project. And we just recently got a $750,000 grant for construction in 2027. So that will actually happen in two phases. We'll have to go back again to get the second phase done. But again, trying to tell you what some of the changes are. T98, Juanita Woodinville, which is also known as Brickyard Road. It's an overlay. I'm not sure why it's not a pavement preservation project. We got an $800,000 grant, again, in 2027. T106 is Canyon Park Transportation Demand Management Program. So our TDM program essentially is kind of like an education incentive program to get people out of their cars. So in Canyon Park, we want the businesses to promote telecommuting, ride sharing, using the transit, riding a bike, anything but single occupancy vehicle car. And we got a grant for that, a state grant, and we had to provide match funding, and it's a 4-year program. The problem with this is we had assigned REAT 2 funds to it, but REAT 2 funds are one-time money and technically supposed to be used to build something. And this is not building anything. So we had to find other funds. So we had some, again, one-time funds available. It was called Developer Frontage Fee in lieu of funds, where the city had done some work and we got funds back from a developer after the fact. And we can pay for the rest of this program using those one-time funds. So that's what we're proposing to finish this program in Canyon Park. The East Riverside Drive Trail has been on the capital facility plan the last time. There was $75,000 for 2023 and $75,000 in 2024 to kind of start planning work with King County. East Riverside Drive Trail, if you can imagine, East Riverside Drive is on the north side. There's an old railroad bed. It's actually owned by King County. So we're kind of at the mercy of King County and when they want to proceed. So unfortunately, in the last 2 years, they've had some resource project problems because they're really trying to focus on East Rail Trail, the one going up and down the corridor for Bellevue and all the way up to Woodinville. The other thing they had some issues with is trails can be considered recreation or transportation. Parks, King County Parks, I think, was trying to get it as recreation because for liability purposes, there's less liability. But I think their council has recently voted that it's going to be a transportation facility. Excuse me. If it was a recreation facility, it limited the type of grant you can get. Now that the door is open, we hope to be able to talk to them and see how far we can get. because it's high on the city priority list, maybe not as high in the King County list, but we do want to do more on that. So what we want to do is, we didn't spend $150,000. We want to move that to 25 and 26. And remember I told you the bike program, there's seed money typically. The council in the last CFP actually put a $1.5 million REAP 2 amount in there because they wanted to prioritize in case there were grants that became available. So this is one thing what we were proposing to do, is perhaps put more money in there, an additional $300,000. And what we would do is start in earnest trying to do planning work and try to get ourselves ready for grants. One of the key things you need to do to be ready for grants is to know how much money you need. And that's harder than it sounds, because you're trying to predict the market. You're trying to predict what you would encounter if you build something. You go through a place and it looks really flat, but it's not as flat as you think, or there's a stream or a wetland or a fish crossing or something there. So planning early and getting a good sense of those high-risk things is very important, and that's one of the things we're recommending for this project. 9th Avenue multimodal project. So 9th Avenue is a very straight road that goes, and I think I'm showing it right here, goes all the way between 228th and up north to 524. You will see a solid line section there and a dotted line section there. So the solid section goes from 524 to the elementary school up there. That's what we consider phase one. We broke this into two because it is a how do you say it, 10 times, it's $40 million or more. It's very large. We want to break it in two because it's bite-sized for grant funding. So we were actually successful, and we got a 1.6, sorry, wrong one. We received a federal design grant. I don't know how much. The only thing different here, though, is rather than start in 2027, which is typically for grants, we may need to match it as early as 2025. And because we're using transportation impact fees and there is a balance there, I think that's a good thing. That means we can start earlier rather than wait later to start design. And I guess the best news is we got a grant for it, so that's good. T13 and T14 are essentially overlay projects, and they would be in the future. We're just adding them in so people know that in the future we're probably going to apply for grants for that, and it's on our list. But right now there's no funding need because it's kind of far out in the future. Okay, so I'm continuing on. So T115 is actually a new project, and it got created because the bike plan that you guys had looked at had the shared use path between our bike facility between West Riverside Drive, where the senior center is, all the way to Main Street. And the pedestrian prioritization also had pedestrian as a key corridor. Now the pedestrian one actually said build a sidewalk on the east side. We're not sure that that's a good bang for your buck, because on the east side there really isn't any facility that would use that sidewalk unless you're north of the bridge. Okay. So what we did do, though, is we said a shared use path would be very beneficial to everybody on this corridor for bikes and peds, and especially the senior community there. And we created a project there, and we actually went after a grant and got one. So we got a $1.6 million federal grant, and we're using $563,000 of that $1.5 million set aside in the bike program as our match for that.
Can I ask you about that one?
Yep.
That's a pretty tight corridor,
Yes.
and you're going to be able to fit
We're going to
something-
have to build a long wall, and we're going to affect some wetlands.
Okay.
Yes.
And then my follow-up question is, further ahead in the plan is replacing that bridge.
Behind. So the bridge right now has a fiberglass deck. It's probably 6 feet wide, 7 feet wide.
Okay.
So when this project is, well, I don't know, but let's say everything goes according to plan. When this project is done, likely we will have the shared use path on both sides of the existing bridge.
Okay.
And a few years later, if everything goes well, the bridge will be replaced and you'll get that wider section on the bridge.
Okay.
So this does everything but the bridge.
All right,
And we were clear in the grant. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, good question. This one as well, we could need it as early as 2025. And since the funds are there, I think that's a good idea, because typically for federal grants, we're getting funds 3 years out. So people want something, and we say, oh, we got design funds. We're not going to start until 3 years from now. But this one, we might be able to start as early as next year or the following year. So that's great. T116 is a new project we're putting on or proposing. It's part of our comprehensive plan. So when I talk to you folks about traffic modeling and trying to get our numbers of trips down, TDM is one way we get trips down. So because we all wanted that to happen, we figured we need a project and make sure we do that. There is no funding actually available there now. And again, this is one of those that is kind of difficult. We can't use REAP 2 funds for it. We would have to find some other source of funding for that. So keep that in mind, and I'll come back to that later as well. Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Thank you. Can you talk to a little bit about the TDM projects in general? I certainly know about them, but to be honest with you, I don't know how effective they are in getting people to get out of their cars. Can you talk about what we can expect and what those programs look like, how we motivate maybe some of these businesses to encourage different modes of transport, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So it's a variety of tools that can be used. It's, well, let me talk about the success thing. There are certain areas that are going to be successful than others. We talk to other agencies, like there's one area in Portland that really has a strong program, and they actually have a lot of on-street parking and they're metered. And every profit off the meter goes into this TDM program. So it is quite successful because they can, it's not a short program, it's a continuous program, and it works very well, and the density is there. So as an example, our Canyon Park program is kind of an interesting one because the business park is a little different. There's a lot of parking there. There's not any street parking, or very little. I think there's some on 26 and 29. So the motivation is going to be different, and the results may be different. Okay, so for 4 years, we have about a $900,000 program, and we had a $600,000 grant. So the city's tossing in $300,000. It will do things like, one is educating people. One is trying to work with businesses to try to work with their people to use different forms of transportation. It could even involve, in a real sense, it could involve things like putting bike racks where they're necessary, so that people have an easy place to store their bikes or secure their bikes. So that's just a little bit more incentive. It could involve actually funding bus passes and kind of changing behavior. So that's kind of how they look at it. So we have a 4-year program. It's not a forever program, but you could subsidize bus passes. And somebody said, you know what, it's free. I'm going to check it out and see how it goes. And you may get a certain success rate with that. And they say, you know, this is not that bad. I thought it would be worse. And there you go. There could be an opportunity as we work with potentially changes in land use and how the parking is set up. Maybe we have maximums, not minimums, things like that. So it could be that we could draw out this program, and maybe you could have more incentive programs for a longer period of time. We just don't know yet. We have worked with the Regional Mobility Grant, which is a state grant, and we have set up targets. So we have goals. I can't tell you off the top of my head what they are, but there are goals there that we would shoot for, and every year or so often we have to do our surveys and see if we've changed anything. Yep. Let's see. Sammamish River Bridge, is that where it was?
Yes.
Okay. So when we talked to the council for the 6-year tip, they were interested in actually a bridge across the Sammamish River. And I think I will go there if I can. How do I do this? Sorry. So in this, I wonder if this mouse will work. Yep, you can see my arrow. So this is the 522 interchange with I-45, and you have East Riverside Drive going, I lost my arrow, sorry. Sorry, I'm going to describe it. So you can see East Riverside Drive kind of paralleling the river, south of the river. And that's where the East Riverside Drive Trail would be. So there's been thought of a pedestrian bike bridge crossing this point because this entire south portion of Bothell, south of the river, does not have easy access to the Sammamish River Trail, which is on the north side. They could go through Woodinville, but there's no trail system there right now as well. So one thought would be to put a bridge across there, and so council was really into it. And this is, again, where we're thinking of using some of the bike program funds, $450,000, to do planning exercise. When you put a bridge in, you do a study, what's called a type, size, and location, because for a bridge, that's where all the costs are. What kind of bridge are you going to do? Is it a wood bridge? Is it a metal bridge? How long does it have to span? Do the grades work out well? Is it flat and that sort of thing? How long does it have to be? And then the location is very key. So we thought we would locate it somewhere between Brickyard Road, and on the west side, you see the mobile home parks, the manufactured homes, somewhere between there.
Even under 405, or is that going to be a right of way the state wouldn't allow?
Not sure. I'm not ruling that out.
Okay. I've always wondered about this, so it's exciting.
Yeah. So the bridge, I think the original thought was if you had a pedestrian bridge there, if you look at the interchange in the northwest quadrant, looks like a little wetland there. That's where the turnaround point's going to be for the BRTs, and that's where they're going to connect. And there's even going to be like a drop-in ride. I think they call it kiss and ride or whatever. You can drop somebody off and they can catch the bus there either on the I-405 or the 522. That's one of the terminologies.
I've heard that.
Don't quote me on that, but
Yeah.
I've heard it.
It's out there.
Like a drop off.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
So one of the original thoughts is if you cross to the north side in the Sammamish River Trail, which is just on the north side, you can see it in a different color of the river, you could potentially cross that interchange to get there. But you can't because 520, WashDOT's not going to allow pedestrians to cross 522. It's going to be kind of wild down there. I don't know if that's a good idea. But you see where there's a trail going under 405 and going up following North Creek, just adjacent to the University of Washington. There is an underpass there, and there will be a walkway to that that quadrant where the buses will be. So theoretically, you can cross the river on the bridge, go down the Sammamish River Bridge to the west, and you can get to UW Bothell, or you can get to that location. You can also walk back to downtown. It's all connected and everything. So it is a good idea, we think. Along with this bridge, what we have inside the CFP is a large number. Typically, a bridge like that would be something on the order of 5 or 6 million, but you'll see a bigger cost there. And that's because if you actually land on the north side, you have a trail. If you currently land on the south side, you have East Riverside Drive, and there's no pedestrian or bike facility. So the thought would be when we put the bridge in, we at least put the trail into Brickyard Road on the north side of Woodinville Drive. That's where the old railroad bed is. And you also put it into the westernmost driveway of those manufactured home parks. And that would serve as at least a facility that can get a lot of people in the neighborhood to the bridge safely. So that's why you see a bigger park there. Again, I think the key thing here is we're suggesting we use some of that bike program funds to start the type, size, and location for that bridge. That means we can go after grants because we know how much this all is going to cost, and we have a plan. Okay. Any questions on that one? It's kind of a different one. Sorry. went too far.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Yes, Sarah Gustafson. Sorry.
Did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I wanted to, first of all, thank you for putting together this great list of projects. And I also wanted to provide some thoughts about accessibility between Riverside Drive and Sammamish River Trail. I think having the infrastructure that was discussed will be great. In the meantime, though, there is a secret way, a secret shortcut to get from East Riverside Drive to the Sammamish River Trail. It's right about 175th Street. And there's a parking lot, and you can go into the back of the parking lot and get onto the trail. And perhaps in the interim, all that would be needed is a curb cut and a discussion with the people who own the parking lot to enhance mobility.
Are we, sorry, just to make sure we're talking the same thing, that's the existing Sammamish River Trail bridge that's kind of leaving the Bothell condos, right, I think? And now there's like ecology blocks blocking it right now? Is that the
Right,
one?
but the property to the west is probably Commissioner Gustafson, because we now all go through that parking lot, at that office building.
Yes,
Because they put up the eco blocks? Yeah, sorry, guilty. Do it all out.
I think maybe the last planning commission meeting I went, or maybe two planning commission meetings ago, I went using that shortcut. So I don't know if it's been eco-blocked yet, and if it is, I'm very sad.
No, the one to the west is still
Block,
unblocked.
okay.
Yeah, the eco block one, which we used for decades, they put the blocks up, I'm sure because of liability or something. So everybody now goes through the stucco office building to the west.
Okay.
Local knowledge.
Thanks.
We have discussed this, yes.
Pavement preservation program. So not much there. We're keeping it. I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. So the pavement preservation program is funded primarily through, right now, the Safe Streets and Sidewalk Levy, which sunsets at the end of 2025. Some REAP 2 funds, waste management, I don't know what you call them, mitigation funds, or just waste management pays the city a certain amount because their trucks are using daily our system and putting wear and tear on our system. So there's a certain amount that gets dedicated to putting back the roadways and maintaining our roadways. Recology. And the last one is the saw cut that we talked about with Commissioner Westerbreit. So those are the sources, and the levy is going away at the end of 2025, which is a big source of funding. I'll talk about that later. The other thing that we did was, because we had levy funding and some of the levy funding was exceeding expectations because the property values were going up, we were able to put more money into this program than we originally thought. So there was some less amount of REAP 2 that was being put in for a few years, and we're trying to catch up with that now. Unfortunately, REAP 2 is kind of leveling off, if not decreasing a little bit. So there's going to be less REAP 2 than we originally anticipated. Usually we would have put in about $330,000 every year. And I think it's going to average out over the levy period plus this new period to be slightly less than that, probably on the order of $270,000 or something. So again, just talking through some of the funding changes. It's not really dramatic, but I guess what we're trying to tell you is REAP 2 is going down. We're trying to catch up on REAP 2 with some of the work here, but there's not going to be a whole as much as we thought available. The sidewalk program, OP6, is filling in the gaps in our sidewalks. That typically was funded at $450,000 of REAP 2 every year. And we will maintain that. And over the 15-year period from 2017, when the levy started, through this new period, we will hold that, so that amount's in there. But again, in the end of 2025, we're going to use the Safe Streets and Sidewalk Levy. So there'll be much less money for sidewalks.
And that is for gaps in sidewalks, not for
Gaps.
maintenance?
Not for maintenance, not for brand new, like East Riverside Drive type of trails or anything, just gaps in sidewalks.
Thank you.
OP15 is a safety program, and originally, if we went back to the other slide, you would have seen we had multiple safety programs. We had neighborhood traffic calming, we had collective corridor safety, we had one that was child safety for near schools and parks, and I think we had a spot safety upgrade. What the staff is proposing is to essentially take that combined $260,000 a year and put it under one safety program umbrella. And there would still be those subsets of types of projects we need to do. But when you get a grant opportunity or you do certain type of work, sometimes it's better done in groups rather than little pieces. And we think this would provide us more flexibility to get more work done and more efficiently. And so it's the same thing, but it's all going to be under one umbrella. No different change in amount that we're going to apply toward it. The one different thing, though, is there's a crosswalk program that's solely being funded by the levy right now at $100,000 per year. And when that goes away, there is no funds for that. And we're not proposing to use extra REIT 2 funds right now for that crosswalk program to be stuck into the safety program. So again, remember that. I'll come back to that later. The last one is the comprehensive plan, which is also kind of those odd ones that this is the one where we do our comprehensive plan work, and over the last couple of years, it's been about $1 million exercise. After this, it'll kind of drop off dramatically how much funding we need, but there's still things we need to do every year. To get through 25 and 26 and finish this big major update, we propose the funding to be taken from transportation impact fee administrative fees. So typically developers will be charged per trip a certain amount, and then there is a 3% administrative fee put on top of that. And we think it's appropriate that that's kind of what we're doing, the concurrency and everything. So that's the fund that can fund it for the next 2 years. But unfortunately, from 27 and beyond, we have not identified a source of funding that we can use. Because again, we can't technically use REIT 2 for this because it's not a project. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry. Okay, so the next few projects are ones we would recommend that actually do require new funding or different funding. So the first one is the 240th 35th roundabout. It's T92. It actually was on the old CFP. We were only going to do about $100,000 of planning work to determine whether we were going to drop a traffic signal there or a roundabout. And we got partway through that. In the northeast corner, there was a developer who came in, and we were able to partner with them, and that helped us quite a bit, and we determined we're going to put a roundabout there. We actually applied for a federal grant, and we got it, so we can finish design on the project. It required a match, and at the time, we didn't have time to go and change our budget. So what I did said, we had safety program funds available, and a roundabout qualifies as a safety project. We put in $163,000 and said, if we get this funding, we would use the safety funds. What I'd like to ask is we actually use transportation impact fee funds, because we do have an end balance of $2.5 million, and $163,000 means much more for the safety program than it does for transportation impact fee type projects. So I would recommend we swap that out to allow the safety program to do things like RRFB, safe crosswalk crossings, and that sort of thing. So that's a recommendation that doesn't quite show up in your packet. And this match is needed as early as 2025. Again, we have an opportunity to start earlier if we have the funds, and that would be a good thing, I think. The next two, we were going to recommend funding, but because our REIT 2 is fairly low at this point, I want to make sure that you just keep these in mind. So the first one is Traffic Equipment Asset Replacement Program. And believe it or not, the city has never had set aside for replacement of traffic equipment like your traffic signals, your RRFBs, flashing beacons, and that sort of thing. So anytime anything became obsolete, and software becomes obsolete every so many years, we had a lightning strike up on 9th and 524th that fried one of our systems. We had people hitting things, and we get partially return in insurance. We have to basically scramble and look for funds throughout our budget. So our thought was to try to set aside a little bit of funding every year just to build up a balance so we didn't have to scramble. But unfortunately, like I said, there is no funding available through our current programs, but keep that in mind. The resiliency program is one we talked to you about as in the comprehensive plan. And basically what that is making sure our roadways, or at least the key emergency routes, are there if there's ever an earthquake or a flood or some sort of event that shuts things down. Again, currently we don't have the program. This would do things like provide backup power for traffic signals. It could provide, there's a few locations that we would love to do landslide investigations to see if there's an earthquake, how much of the roadway would be covered, and if there's a way that we can prevent that or at least mitigate it. And even things like there are certain locations in the city that flood regularly, and if we put just a gauge there, we could get quick notification that things are flooding rather than somebody having to try to drive out there and put eyes on top of it. Again, insufficient funds at this time, so, but, okay. So the last slide I have, these are some things that we would like you to consider, not necessarily going to be in the CFP, but consider in the future. So again, the Safe Streets and Sidewalk Levy expires at the end of 2025, and new funding to replace this levy has not been put into this current CFP, okay? So our paving programs, our sidewalk program, the crosswalk program suffers from that, and if you look at the numbers, you can kind of see that. We are going to try to finish 4 projects with the existing levy funds that we have, and that's a 130th and 132nd, and I didn't write it up there, I'm sorry. 130th Place and 132nd Sidewalk Project, it's T84 if you want to write that down. Also, we got a grant for 4 flashing school beacons that were currently in design and were put up next year. We did get some overlay funds that we're going to use as well, and we're going to try to finish the 224th Street Southwest Sidewalk Improvement Project as well. The 2 sidewalk projects that we listed, when we started the levy, the sidewalk project was the sidewalk program was prioritized for schools. So our overall city kind of sidewalk program suffered a little, but what that task force, we had a task force prioritize those. They had like 4 tiers of prioritized projects, and we're trying to get through at least the first 9 if we can, in some form or fashion. And I think if we get these 2 done, we'll be within maybe 3, and one of which is 9th Avenue, which we just got design funds, so we'll be down to 2. And if we have 4 grants in right now, which we haven't been fortunate, but if we get 1 or 2, we might be able to finish all those 9 at some point. So that's our goal, to try to tie a bow on that levy system for the sidewalks. Bike program, although there's a 1.5 million one-time drop in there, if you look at the amount year by year, it's not that much. I think it's a few $100,000, and we've heard that's a priority. So that's another thing to consider in the future about coming up with some sort of funding mechanism for these needs. And again, like I talked to you before, the TDM programs and the comprehensive plan programs, and even things like education in the bike program, if we want to do education and we have READ 2 funding, technically we're not supposed to use that funds. And it's not a big need. It's more like $10,000, $15,000 a year. It's not a huge need, but those type of funds those type of things need some sort of sustainable funding that we just haven't identified yet. Downtown cleanup, the one odd duck in this is we did not know where to put downtown cleanup in our CFP. It's not a park project. It's not a facility project. So we just put it in transportation. We have obligations to finish a cleanup. We're in agreements with the Department of Ecology. Right now, I think there's a couple $1 million of shortfall you'll see unsecured. So sometime in the future, we may or may not need that. I'm just, again, pointing that out to you. And then the last thing, sorry to be so long, maintenance and operations. So if you look at every single project, most of your projects on your sheet, at the very bottom, there's a maintenance and operation spreadsheet. When we know that it's going to be built, so sometime when we get funding for design or we're in construction, we try to fill that out and give an idea of how much the annual cost to maintain that new facility is. So things like pavement projects are 0 because it's a maintenance project. But things like the Bothell Way multimodal project is going to require more work. There'll be landscaping in there. There'll be sidewalks that need to be repaired once in a while. There'll be bike lanes that need to be swept. So that all costs something. So we try to put that cost in there so that we know how much we need to put in the budget once those projects are complete. So I really want to point that out because that's very important. I think we do a good job as a city in getting funding for our transportation projects. What the difficult part is trying to maintain all this new infrastructure that we're building. Yeah. That's what I have at this point. I don't know if you have, it's a lot, I'm sorry. If there are questions, we'd certainly be open to trying to answer them.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Lever?
Thank you. I have a question about the resiliency program that doesn't have any funds. When it comes to determining what's set aside and then knowing what's kind of happening with climate change and all the things that we see happening around the world and here, knowing that marginalized communities get disproportionately impacted by natural disasters, how did the team decided to prioritize a pedestrian bridge, for instance, rather than funding the resiliency program? And perhaps they're completely different funding sources. But I just want to learn more about why putting that aside, knowing what's sort of like happening and who might actually get impacted.
Yeah. So when we looked at the pedestrian bridge project across the Sammamish River, it was not in the former CFP, and when we went to the 6-year tip with the council, it was requested to be put in. The funds came from the bike program, that 1.5 million set aside. So there's nothing to say we can't shuffle funds around based on priorities. That's kind of what the CFP is all about. Now that you know kind of the breadth of what's going on, what's most important. So that's certainly something that's up for discussion. I will also say that not every project is discrete. In other words, in the comp plan, for example, not in the CFP, but in the comp plan, one of the future projects we're looking at is 228th Street from city limit to city limit. And it's actually not a road project. There's only one capacity project. It's adding a right turn lane at 29th at the signal. The rest of it is protected bike lane, sidewalks, especially where there are no sidewalks, safety improvements, and there are a couple areas that could flood in that place, which is a resiliency issue. So there are many projects that we're trying to group together because they compete better for grants. And a lot of these projects are very expensive, and if you don't get a certain type of grant, it's going to be very difficult to get that project built. So the resiliency program, again, should be looked at as seed money, and we really would like money. Unfortunately, right now, we just don't see where there is any. We had hoped there would be REAP 2, but REAP 2 is not doing very well. And that's, I think, part of this discussion about when the levy sunsets. If there's an opportunity, and there probably will be discussions about what's going to happen in the future, we just want to put in your mind some of the things that you may think about are your priorities that might be able to be discussed when we're looking at that new funding source.
Other questions, comments? I always wondered on the downtown cleanup how much the city has pursued other potentially responsible parties. I mean, the city didn't cause that contamination in many cases, yet it's ended up with a significant amount of the expense.
So you're stretching my memory because it started a while ago. So I can remember one of the former gas station sites on the south side of the old 522. We actually pursued the gas company that was the overseer of the franchise or whatever you call it. And I think we did get some funds out of them. I remember discussion about the corner. There used to be the ultra dry cleaner on this corner here. The person who owned it at the very end, there wasn't much behind there, and it just would have been not very, financially, it probably wouldn't make sense going after that person, especially from a legal sense. So I think there was that discussion, property by property, with the school district. When we purchased the school district, there was some sort of recognition of there are some contamination on there, and that was discussed. I don't know, I mean, these are all underground things, and people try to quantify them, so you do the best you can to get a fair deal and make sure it's equitable. At the end of the day, you don't know how well we did, but there was some consideration in purchasing that property. Yeah.
And did the city pursue MOTCA funds, state level funding?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So for most of this, you should look at the sheet. I can't remember the number, but typically you can get up to 50%. We were fortunate to get in fairly early, and we had a few years where we were getting up to 75%. They've changed the rules again because money is hard to come by, and they've defined matching money for the initial cleanup. And then there's a lot of work to monitor it for a period of time after. They're not matching that funds anymore. That's all on the city at this point. So at one point, we pursued, I think, a $200,000 grant for EPA, but there were so many red strings attached to that that it just wasn't worth the while for the size of the amount we were getting. So the really big source of funding we've been really pushing for is MACA, and to the point where our legislative agenda has basically said, please fund Department of Ecology MACA grants, because we're one of the recipients, and it's very important to us. So that has been, I think, for 10 or 12 years, high on their list, yes.
Thank you. Model Toxics Control Act, for those who don't
Yes.
play.
So one of...
Yes,
oh,
Commissioner
go ahead.
Sills.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, I'm always thinking about how I see these amazing projects and there's so much work and money and patience that go into them. And then it's sort of in your head for a few days or maybe a few weeks, and then it kind of disappears. So is there any, do you have any sort of year in review or ways you're able to sort of quantify for the public so they can really see all this amazing work and appreciate it, even though they're not driving or using this sidewalk, but kind of see the collective effort so that when, you are looking to do another levy or explain what else you want to do, they can kind of recall all the stuff that, has come online and has changed?
I think so I think two ways. In one way, I think we do a pretty good job in celebrating the opening of new facilities, such as like when Horse Creek opened, when new roadways, the multi-way boulevard opened, we do celebrations. You're right, years later, we probably don't. In terms of the levy, I think a couple things we tried to do is make sure that toward the end of the levy, right about now, that we are seeing things happen. You see a lot of paving going on, and that's a little bit by accident, but also because we've been trying to be strategic. Strategic in two ways. One way was especially trying to get as much bang for the buck as we could, and most of every single project you see going on, except 185th, we've gotten grants for. And so hopefully visibility that, hey, yeah, we see things going on helps. So we try not to do everything up front and nothing last. We try to spread it out. And sidewalks have been hard. We got very successful up front with grants. In between, we have not been successful. We have one more shot and 4 grants, like I told you, in. And if we do get them, then you will see a wave of sidewalk projects go out, which hopefully, again, visibility. I think that's a great question. I think general public-wise, maybe we could have done better, and we can do better. I think it's also a resource issue. I think from a general other agency visibility, Bothell has done really well. We talk to other agencies, and we always get compliments on how things are moving on and certain ways we do things. But that's not the general public, so, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I just think there's an amazing opportunity with the light rail, like the East Link and it expanding north and just people to start rethinking their habits or where they're going and how they're getting there, and just knowing all the new things that are coming up, because I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like I totally discovered the neighborhood during the pandemic because I wasn't in my normal patterns and I've heard stories about like, in London when the tube shut down and people had to find other ways to get around, and then they stuck with that new way because they had discovered, oh, I actually like that better. So it's just kind of like disrupting how people just sort of get stuck in their ways and making sure they're aware of kind of, again, all the amazing work once it is actually comes to fruition, which I know it takes a long time. But every year we must have something, right? Because we're continuously doing this. So great work.
I think that's a good idea. I'll write that down. That's a great idea. I think one of the other things that I think when you have a lot going on and resource challenge, one of the things that drops by the wayside is education as well. And I know there's two sides of it. Will people really learn? But there's also the side of it, like you said, some people know what's available, and that's part of the education. And for me, at least, I really want to start on the education on the safety side. We put up a lot of these new devices, like RRFBs. You press the button and it flashes, and people don't use it the right way. And it's very frustrating because they'll press the button and walk, and you're like, oh. No, press the button, wait, watch the car stop, and then into the road. So just simple things like that would really enhance the use of what we can do. And I think that's part of it, the education part, yeah.
Commissioner Lever.
Thank you. That just sort of got me thinking like in technology again. And then I just love heat maps to just really kind of represent where the funding goes. And then oftentimes when we think about fees or we don't even think about the fees, but really seeing where the money is being funded and knowing that not everything gets funded. So have that visual that will allow us to see which areas of the city for one reason or another are not really receiving these monies will be super helpful. And unless I didn't look well, like I was looking online and I just don't see anything like that, and that might be kind of helpful as another tool just to really see how the concentration of the distribution of the funds.
Great. Good idea.
Okay, other comments? Commissioner Robson?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, I didn't see a project for bikes crossing right at that intersection of with Beardsley Avenue, where it sort of meets North Creek. We'd been talking about it last year a little bit. That kind of goes, and I didn't see it there, but maybe I misread it. Is that still on the docket somewhere? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is that right at I-405?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I-405, Beardsley Avenue, and it's real just hard to get through that area.
That is not, but that is something that we can start looking at through the bike program. Because it has been brought up before, I think. And it's not just bikes, it's generally crossing there, I think, yeah.
And if I can mention, because there is the way to pass, and I'm going to start trouble with council. From my perspective, it seems to make more sense if we can complete that road from the Y to 405 over to the college with Beardsley and 405, as opposed to moving a pedestrian pathway a little closer through the mobile home parks across the Sammamish River, which I think would be really valuable for sure, but we're all doing it illegally anyway. So maybe we could so from my perspective, I think we'd get more bang from our buck completing that Beardsley Passway than moving and making a pedestrian bridge. So, council can go fight to the death over it, I guess.
So to be clear, are you talking about crossing I-405 or the multiple crossings you got to do to get across I-405 along Beardsley 195th?
What I'm talking about is, I'll show you. So it's right here. So I guess what I'm talking about is that there's really no safe way to get from 195th across 405 through Beardsley. That's a really great thoroughfare, but there's not a safe way to do it. And in that just that little curb, right? Well, I suppose it's not a curb, but the bridge right there can be really hazardous. And we had talked a lot about it last year. And so I was just wondering if it's something we can consider.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a topic of discussion during the bike plan discussion. And it links the North Creek Trail to downtown.
Okay. Yes, we will look at that.
It's also got the new developments in there from the Seattle Times. Yeah. So it would create a lot of access just to those businesses. And
Well, and
such.
if I could just jump in, like there is a sidewalk, right? It's
Heinous.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not.
You've got to cross the on and off ramps.
Yeah,
which
you
is-
have to.
You take your life in your
Yeah,
hands.
but there's a crosswalk.
Right,
There's a
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very
just
busy. A lot of
unnerving,
people are
yeah.
doing it. And you've got the great path from you to Bothell, but then you just stop, and you're just on your own.
Yeah, having ridden that, it's exciting.
Okay, so, we will look at that. My suspicion, because WashDOT controls a lot of that, is we will do what we can. And likely, things we would put in there would be more like visual things, like if we could get some sort of visual thing that people are crossing. I think we're doing a paving project. I have to check with them to see if they're successful in getting different types of crossing marks. I mean, even that's, we got to work with WashDOT on. I will tell you that the ultimate solution is actually to separate the peds and bikes from the roadway, but that's a longer term thing, and that interchange is still on the long-term master plan for WashDOT to rework. That's when you get your final solution, I think, but we will work on something. I hear you saying that's a high priority to try to address as best we can now, so, yeah, thank you.
Other commissioner comments or questions? Seeing none, I think does that conclude your
Sorry.
presentation? Oh, is there? Oh, Commissioner Gustafson, yes.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. Thanks, Chair. I'm really impressed by how much funding has actually been secured, and it's great to see that bottom line. Congratulations. And I did want to kind of follow up on some of the questions that Commissioner Robson and Commissioner Lever were asking. And I think they were asking, is it possible to switch out one project perhaps for another? And one project that was mentioned as perhaps being able to be switched out was that Sammamish River Bridge. And I'm wondering, how feasible is this? Is this worth looking at, or at least stretching our brains around for the sake of argument? Thank you.
I would guess that as a group, if you guys have suggestions, I brought up a couple of things that would change funding. So that one is a new one, and that was put on the 6-year TIP process. No work has started on it yet. The other one was switching out some funds for the 35th, 240th roundabout, which we use safety funds. Really like to use TIF funds if you guys are okay with that. Talked about the resiliency program. If that's high on the list and we need to find funds, we can try to find funds, but again, it's difficult. REIT 2 is typically what it is. Interestingly enough, if you, as an example, 35th, 240th roundabout is 163,000 out of, right now it says safety funds, but I actually looked in the sheet, and it looks like some of it's REIT 2. And if we swap that REIT 2 out and you wanted to apply it to resiliency funds. So those are kinds of things we can do. If you have input on the PED bridge, that's certainly that we can take down as this is something we heard from the Planning Commission. So yes, I think that's why we're here to, yeah.
Well, I think the discussion I heard from the other commissioners, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was while it's a commendable project, it's a very expensive project, and it probably knocking off some other things that might get more, dare I say, bang for our buck more quickly So there's concern about that focus.
Related, related to that, this is Commissioner Westerbeck. I know there's, I can't always keep track of everything, but there's talk about, I know it's been a high priority to get sidewalks onto East Riverside. And I think you even brought it up today. It seems like if, and I, for years have wanted that bridge down by Brickyard Road for those neighborhoods, and you could cross there. And there's not much shoulder for people coming from Woodinville on bikes. And if you're not on the trail, then you're just going to subject to, hopefully people aren't going to mow you down in the car. Anyway, East Riverside Drive, there's also been a lot of agitation from the folks who live on that section for sidewalks. We've all probably seen the signs out there during election season and stuff. And I can't recall if they're trying to extend East Rail when they once they do the Woodinville portion into Bothell along there, because I thought the mayor was talking about that. How he was kind of saying to the neighbors there, "We're not going to give you a sidewalk, but we're going to give East Rail through there," and they were a little upset because they don't want the bushes to be taken out on the north side. But it's my understanding, it sounds like they're trying to design East Rail through the north side of East Side Riverside Drive, which would then take people safely to the bridge. So they'd have to ride an extra half a mile or something, but they would get to the existing bridge. And if it's already being planned, East Rail or a trail would be going in there. It would sort of reduce the need for that bridge, like Commissioner Robson talked about. So I know it's a lot to bring up, but I'm curious where all the planning is for that East Riverside Drive sidewalk or East Rail connection between Woodinville, Bothell, and ultimately the bridge that we already have.
Those are great questions, and maybe I'm going to ask you guys a question just to get your opinion. So East Rail would go north-south, I believe, and in Woodinville, we would have to connect up. And so,
Okay, because I know, they've talked about it connecting to Woodinville, then it would keep going north, right, through North Creek? That would be the idea, or maybe I have that totally wrong.
to get to the East Rail,
Like East Rail, because they talk about it going up to Snohomish County, right? So it's got to go through Bothell somehow. So I thought it was going to zig through Bothell maybe, and then continue, like, it's northerly, but it has to,
yeah. I
Or
guess
the-
I was more looking,
or are they going to go
that's a
directly
good
through
question.
Woodinville
I
north?
always thought that our north primary trail would be North Creek, like you
Right,
said.
North Creek, yeah.
And then once we get to Woodinville, if you want to go south on the east side, what you would do is use East Riverside Drive
Yeah.
Trail,
Yeah.
hopefully in the future.
Right,
You get to the Woodinville border, they would have to continue it a little bit and then get into their city.
yeah.
And then from there, you can get on the East Trail. So that's the connection to the East Trail from
Okay.
our city, I think.
Okay,
in one
I misunderstood. So
So
they're just trying to connect downtown, it sounds like, with the east side,
So
East Riverside Drive.
Yeah, so one of the things on East Riverside Drive that is kind of a dilemma for us is we want to connect, we want to finish something along East Riverside Drive because we need to connect. There's communities there that need to be connected up. So one way, as an example, we have sidewalk on the south side of the road from 102nd Avenue, the senior center, all the way to about 111th, and then it stops. So it'd be great to at least put a sidewalk on one side all the way to like Brickyard.
That's what the neighbors have been asking for, so I thought there was pushback on that from the city, so this
Well,
is
let me go
interesting.
through this. So to do a good sidewalk, I mean, you can put a sidewalk or the curb and a 5-foot sidewalk, but it's not the safest sidewalk. So typically you want a curb, a little bit of buffer, and a 5-foot sidewalk. So if you think about that side of the street, there's the drainage ditch. So we would have to pipe the drainage ditch, and because you're building curbs, you put catch basins in, and you do that all the way around to Brickyard Road. That's pretty much the same cost as the trail. So the question then becomes, if we do that sidewalk, you probably won't have enough money for your trail. So is it a better bang for your dollar to put the trail in, which serves bikes and pedestrians, or put the sidewalk in? So that's the dilemma that we're having. We would love to do both.
That's what I heard too. And then
Yeah.
I heard that some on council were saying, we want to do the trail because it serves two modes better than the one. So maybe
Yeah.
that was what I heard, but this is also sort of conversational, so.
So I think what we will do is we will see how far we can get with King County and how the horizon looks. And if it looks like a really long thing, then I think we're back to everybody coming back and sitting down and saying, how urgent is the need here? And do we have to push that off because we need to finish at least something? So if there's a sidewalk there, yes, you gotta walk your bike there, but at least it's a safe walk. So that's kind of the dilemma we're fighting with right now. And I would say give us a year and a half to figure that out with King County, and then we'll probably know better where we stand.
Thanks. I heard all kinds of things around that, so.
Commissioner Robson?
Either way, it brings us back to that pedestrian bridge over the Sammamish River. I think if we can get a sidewalk or a trail, it'll make it so much more easier to get it, down to the senior center all the way, because you have a safer way to do it, that then the pedestrian down to the senior center and crossing the Sammamish River right downtown, even though it's not necessarily the most efficient way to do that, it makes it so much easier than putting in then you don't need the pedestrian bridge right there as much. And if we're trying to connect all the different pieces, once we've got the trail or sidewalk on Riverside, I think that the Beardsley option, we're addressing another area of the city that also needs some improved connectivity right there. So I feel like the pedestrian bridge that connects Riverside over to the trail, while important, maybe if we're doing the sidewalks and the trail contingent on that, which I do think are very important, then we can put that pedestrian bridge as a second tier to the Beardsley connectivity. That's just where I'm coming from.
And you are making the investments on 102nd to improve that crossing.
102nd from East Riverside Drive to
Yes.
Main Street, yes.
Yeah. And perhaps that informal crossing could be formalized. Because there's a bridge there as well. The trail crosses the river.
I mean, whoever owns that property should just finalize it.
Would you mind sending me a circle on where that is, or do you not feel comfortable doing that?
Which part, sorry?
The secret,
Oh, yeah, no problem.
okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I'm sure the property owner's concerns would go to liability, and an easement might be able to be crafted to address that.
So I think there's a couple options. One is 102nd Avenue, improve that from a lousy sidewalk to a shared use path. The second one is secret one if it's not private. The third one is there is a bridge by Bothell condos that we need to probably work a little bit on that one as well. But all of those kind of rely still on having something on
On
East
East
Riverside
Riverside.
Drive to get to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Commissioner Gustafson?
Hey, Sarah Gustafson here. To put a bow on everything we've been talking about, would it be helpful to make a motion or some statement for the record that this is what we recommend? And I hate to say this, but I might just add one more small thing, which is the crossings at 527 and 405. It's only $100,000 and it's so dangerous. So if we're talking about freeway safety, I might put in a plug for that, but I'm totally understanding if that is not the focus right now. And I really want to uphold what the other commissioners have been saying first.
So for that particular one, that $100,000 is that if you're walking northbound on the east side of 527, north of 228 by PCC, and that first crossing, that one is funded fully.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Never mind then.
All we're waiting for is
I-
WashDOT to get their thing done, and then we can go ahead and install where we need to.
So thrilled to hear that. So I amend the motion or whatever we might want to present to just what it was that the other commissioners had discussed.
We
Thank you.
certainly could entertain a motion that would be transmitted to council if someone wants to articulate one.
Sarah Gustafson here. I nominate Commissioner Robson, but if she declines, I will do it.
I mean, I can certainly come up with something. On the spot's always a little tricky, though, right?
Yeah.
Something along the line is that we'd like to call attention to the crossing at Beardsley. Maybe something about focusing connectivity throughout the city as opposed to concentrating it on East Riverside Drive. So in an effort to, who's writing this down?
I'll start writing.
Okay, you start writing. In an effort to, what did I say? Equalize connectivity throughout the city as opposed to concentrating resources along East Riverside Drive. The Planning Commission would like to suggest improving sidewalks and trails along East Riverside Drive and deprioritizing the pedestrian bridge across the Sammamish River in order to focus resources on improving connectivity along Beardsley to the, was it Seattle Times? That was over there? Yeah. Seattle Times area and developments.
Right.
Avalon.
To your point about all the new housing and
Right.
people there, I think that was a really good point to include.
Let me ask some questions of staff. You indicated there'll be a presentation to the council July 30th. Or, is that what you said? Yeah. And then another one in early September. Do you know when that might be?
Right now.
It will likely be on September the 3rd for the following workshop or study session.
Okay, and that kills that thought. I was thinking if we don't meet again until, I believe, September 4th. We could craft something offline, but if they'll have their second briefing before then, that timing doesn't work.
I mean, as long as we get our sentiments down, I don't think it needs to be an eloquent work of literature. Just say, hey, this is-
Okay.
And then
So
if we
just
could,
sorry. So just to
Yes.
clarify, the July 30th, that study session will focus on parks and transportation projects. The September 3rd meeting will be concentrating in the area of utility projects.
Okay.
But again, they are not going to take any actions until October, and then the final vote will be in November.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Lieber?
if we could just also add, really looking at the resiliency program, just to make sure that there's an emphasis on funding that.
Well, I guess then picking up on my thought, if they're not going to act until October, we could form an ad hoc committee that could meet offline and craft something for that October meeting, which we could then discuss in a commission meeting before that, if there's interest in that. Commissioner Robson.
How is our input here influencing what you guys are going to City Council? Are you guys just giving a brief report of what we talked about? Is it influencing your presentation? How is this going to play out, our input now?
I think for the smaller ones, like the resiliency, and if we can shuffle things, like I said, 240 keep forgetting, 240th, 35th roundabout, if we can reduce the REIT amount and use TIF money and fund a couple years of resiliency, that buys us time to think about how we're going to sustain that in the future, along with some other programs, right? Some of the bigger stuff like Bridge versus East Riverside Drive Trail versus looking at what to do at Beardsley 195th crossing of I-405. That one's a little more difficult because they're kind of large projects, and that really is a priority. Where do you want to stick your funding, you know? So, yeah.
So the CFP is really a 7-year plan. So even if we cannot accomplish everything by the next biennium, that's why it is the purpose of the 7-year plan. So as long as the projects are on the plan, we will have time to do the additional analysis. And as Stephen said, we really need to consider your other partners as well. So you're going ahead with one project without considering the impact on others would not do us any favor. So I would love to have your input. And if you have additional comments or additional direction for staff, they really they can go into the 7-year plan even after the council adopts the next biennium's budget. Because again, we only have so much that we can afford to do in the next 2 years. But the rest of the projects, we need to list them as additional funding may be coming or grants that they appear on our doorstep. We will take advantage of those opportunities. So again, we will seek your really general direction from you rather than just telling staff like, oh, I want to do this project, because we really need to do the analysis. And again, as I mentioned, more strategically and more comprehensively. But your feedback, we are taking notes, and again, they will go into the 7-year CIP.
Commissioner Robson.
So if I can just summarize, a motion, you guys feel that a motion would be the appropriate way to communicate this to city council as opposed to just like telling
Projects.
you to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
That would
we
be
can
helpful
do that. Just
because
checking. Got it.
So do we have a motion? Do we want to do one today or shoot for that October meeting?
We really appreciate some general guidance for staff, because we will need to have the time in order to finalize our projects and, of course, the CFP. And then the conversation doesn't stop here. So we will continue to seek feedback from you, and also we will have public hearings to get feedback from the communities as well.
Yes. Commissioner Robson?
Maybe we should hear what Sarah Gustafson was able to put together. Were you typing, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yes, Commissioner Robson, I was. Thank you.
Maybe we
I
can
will
just
read it
hear
out
what you
and then-
got together, and then we can add maybe the resiliency element to it.
Yeah.
Sure. The Planning Commission would like to suggest improvement of sidewalks and trails and deprioritizing the pedestrian bridge across the Sammamish River to improve connectivity along Beardsley to the Seattle Times area and recent developments, in an effort to equalize connectivity throughout the city, to support new housing and people. In addition, I'm going to keep this up, we really encourage the council to find ways to devote funds to emergency resiliency, because, I'm trying to get Commissioner Lever's words here, it is oftentimes our most, I don't know, marginalized communities who bear the brunt of these climate resiliency impacts.
Thoughts?
Sorry, that was too
Commissioner
fast.
Robson?
And, Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Gustafson. I'm feeling like we don't have the words quite finalized, and maybe we do want to formalize it outside the meeting and then bring it back.
So per our bylaws, we can form an ad hoc committee to form, and I'll just read the bylaws, to carry out certain specific duties as the commission deems advisable, and it shall not exceed 3 members. So if up to 3 folks would like to get together and craft a statement to council on this, that could be a motion to form an ad hoc committee. Okay.
Make a motion to form an ad hoc committee to craft a message to council.
Council regarding capital facilities plan.
Right.
Okay.
Regarding capital facilities plan. Thank you, Chair.
Need to have our purpose. Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Lever, second. It's been moved and seconded that an ad hoc committee be formed to craft a motion to council around the commission's priorities and recommendations on the transportation element of the capital facilities plan. Any discussion around that motion? No? All right. So I'll first ask who's
Sorry.
for a, oh, Commissioner Gustafson, yes.
Commissioner Gustafson here. I did just wanted some clarity from Finance Director Wong on that. He feels that this is the most productive way to proceed. I wasn't sure whether a motion was what he had in mind. I do think there was some really good points made about making sure that these are comprehensive, and I do wonder if we might be able to bring in some of his insights if such a committee was formed.
Yeah, so again, I would love to have your feedback, and I think all of you have already made your tremendous contribution, and we are taking notes. So we will present a summary of our discussion at the July 30th Council study session, and if again any motion or statement that you can come up with. Again, focusing on the big picture rather than on individual projects, that would be helpful. But I would encourage you to have something to us as soon as possible, because we really need to finalize, the plan. Again, it is a 7-year plan. We want to make sure that projects that are not being funded on the plan, so that when an opportunity like a grant or something that is wonderful falling on our lap with among our partners, we will be able to take advantage of those.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Gustafson?
I think that feedback is consistent with the motion and as a whole. I also support the motion.
I think that motion or whatever draft form works for us.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that I won't repeat the motion. I think it's been captured. Any further discussion on that motion?
Who's going to be on the committee?
Well,
I volunteer to be part of it.
Okay, that'd be
And
one.
I nominate.
Commissioner Lever,
Yeah,
that's 2.
Commissioner Lever, yeah.
We could, per the bylaws, have a third participant if there's interested, or 2 could do it as well.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Gustafson, are you interested? Available?
Maybe, thank you for asking. I do have a lot of thoughts about this, but it's also becoming tax season. I would love to be an alternate or be kept in the loop.
All right, so it's moved and seconded that we have this ad hoc committee consisting of 2 members, Commissioners Lever and Robson. I don't think there's any further discussion. I'll look around briefly and see. All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion is passed. So the ad hoc committee would report back to us. Our next meeting is September 4th, and we would discuss that and transmit it to council. So thank you all for your thoughts on that. I think it is prudent to take time. There's a lot of things we're talking about here, and they're all related, but to be able to articulate it clearly, I think has value. Commissioner Westerbeck?
This is sort of after the fact, because I think the ad hoc committee is a good idea, but just to be thinking about when you go, I really think the bridge, the one that we're saying we are recommending not doing, and that the funds and resources can be used elsewhere, is actually a pretty important bridge and could serve a purpose. But I would be fine saying nix it, like you're suggesting, as long as we are prioritizing that connection on Riverside Drive. Because you've got to have one or the other, I think. So that's my only point is I think it's fine because you only have to go like an extra 5 minutes if you're on a bicycle or something, big deal, and you're saving $10 million or something like that. But you're going to spend some to do the sidewalk or the trail. So, okay, that's all I was curious about. Thanks.
And I'm not sure the recommendation was to nix the bridge entirely, but rather to prioritize these other projects first. But again, our ad hoc committee will work on that. Thank you all. Good discussion. Anything else on this topic?
So can I just finish up by saying thank you so much again for taking your time this evening to give us feedback. And again, as I said, I wanted to talk about what we are doing, what we are planning to do, and why we are doing this. And this is exactly why we are doing it this way, to have feedback from boards and commissions to make sure that we are doing the right thing. And there is no easy answer. As you know, resources are limited. We need to use the resources wisely and strategically. So again, thank you for your feedback. We will again go into the City Council with in their study sessions to update them on with your feedback. Thank you so much.
On behalf of Commission, Director Wong, thank you for both your presentation and for the staff present here.
Yeah, Gretchen.
I think you can tell we've been very engaged. It's been very interesting to the Commission.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the topic being brought to us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So moving on, just got a couple of items that are brief. Unless anyone feels the need for a break, I think we might power through. Any thoughts? Keep going. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So next item is reports from members. Anything to bring to the group? I'd just say I made the presentation to council on our discussion on the Imagine Bothell plan. I tried to represent the thoughts here, took notes, and I think it was pretty well received. So thank you all for the feedback, and I think they heard what we had to say. So any other?
Just want to say thank you for representing us. I watched that, and I think you did a really good job of summarizing everything we've been discussing as a planning commission. Appreciate that.
It was interesting to me. Before my presentation, there was a recognition of Disability Awareness Month, and I actually tried to then fold that into what I said. It wasn't in my prepared comments, but to make sure that what we do is accessible, that all can get to it. So, yeah, that was an interesting thing I heard. So, all right, reports from staff.
Yeah, thought I'd join you over here and save your necks from having to turn around. So a few updates on items that went to City Council recently. So July 9th, the residential frontage improvement ordinance held a public hearing. The draft is carrying forward the recommendation from Planning Commission as originally drafted, and staff will be returning to council in the fall after with the final ordinance following the August recess and Department of Commerce review. Last night, we held a public hearing on parking standards that were initiated by state bill. So it never came through Planning Commission. It was staff responding to a state bill that required some adjustments that were very limited, all focused on residential parking. So eliminating things like a requirement for residential parking to be in a garage or other structure, not not allowing, if it's a single-family home, you can park it in a garage, you can park it in a carport or on a driveway. We cannot require in a structure parking, same as multifamily. It adjusted some parking dimensional standards and a few other items. So very, very discreet. That is, again, moving forward. It will come back to council this fall. Same thing after commerce review. And then last night, we presented the preferred alternative recommendation from Planning Commission. Council, we got a little bit of feedback from them, a few little things, but no tweaks to it. They really thought that it was really well put together, and they really appreciated and thanked you profusely on the work that you've done to get it to this point, and they're looking forward to the study sessions this fall to run through all the elements, including the future land use map and zoning. So that's it.
All right, thank you. I think that brings us to conclusion. So there being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the planning commission meeting.
Commissioner Westerbeck moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Lever that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned at 8:07 this evening. Our next meeting will be September 4th. I hope you have a very nice summer and hope to see you all on Main Street during one of the many events. Good night, all.
Or, here we go.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Wrong direction, yeah.
Recording stopped.